Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our third WIN Fellowship event of the UAE cohort. I'm so excited to be here today to discuss the role of entrepreneurship in shaping the future of smart cities in the UAE and the MENA region overall. To kick off this event, I would like to introduce Dalia Udin, the Head of Public Affairs at the U.S. Consulate in the UAE. She will be providing some opening remarks to kick off the event.
Hi. Good evening, everyone. Good morning to colleagues joining from Washington or the United States, and a special warm welcome to all of our WIN Fellows who are joining us virtually. My name is Dalia Udin. I'm head of the Public Affairs section at our U.S. Consulate in Dubai. My colleague Lana Ayash is here with me. Together, we have been managing our women's economic empowerment portfolio here in the UAE. We have a few different programs, including the Women Innovators Fellowship implemented by Atlantic Council in partnership with Georgetown McDonough Business School. I'm very honored to be here for this event for our second cohort. I remember speaking at the launch of the very first cohort where I met one of our alumni, Al-Dabi Al-Mehri, who's the youngest entrepreneur in the UAE and constantly breaking records here in the UAE. We had a very exciting year over the past 12 months here in the UAE. We hosted our first Women's Economic Empowerment Summit for the region, bringing together women entrepreneurs and youth entrepreneurs as well from 14 countries in the region, the MENA region and Central Asia. And we're continuing to expand and grow our programs and partnerships with partners like Atlantic Council, NYU Start AD, Georgetown, and we're planning more events as well. But this last weekend, we had a first US pavilion at the Sharjah Entrepreneurship Festival, where we highlighted several alumni from the WIN cohort, as well as the Academy of Women Entrepreneurs and Injas. So we're hoping to continue that tradition. We'll hope to see some of the alumni from this cohort participate in the future, and I wish everyone the best of luck with the rest of the program.
Thank you, Dalia. Thank you so much. And now I will just provide a few remarks about the topic of our session today. We are here to discuss one of the most exciting and transformative shifts happening in our modern world, and it's one that I particularly am very excited and interested in, and that is the future of smart cities. As urbanization continues to accelerate, cities around the globe are exploring new ways to harness data, technology, and innovation to enhance the lives of their citizens. But we are specifically at a very important moment in history because cities are no longer just hubs of physical infrastructure. They're also evolving, and they are dynamic centers that have interconnected ecosystems that must adapt to the challenges of the 21st century, among which is, of course, the accelerating growth of our world population. In fact, the United Nations estimates that the world's population is projected to reach 8.5 billion people in 2030 and to increase to 9.7 billion in 2050. And in particular, in the MENA region, this number is estimated to be very, very fast growing. This means that the world will be facing new challenges, from transportation congestion to waste management, energy efficiency, and affordable housing, but also to public safety measures and ensuring that we have equal economic opportunities for all. So this also means that we will be facing new opportunities in which smart cities can represent the intersection of technology, sustainability, and resilience. But as we all know, technology alone cannot solve this complex problem. It is the entrepreneurial spirit, and I'm glad that we have some founders with us today here in person and online. It is the entrepreneurial spirit, the innovators, and the risk takers who will be pushing the boundaries of what is possible. Entrepreneurship is not just about creating new businesses, it's about creating new solutions. And I'm hoping that you will be shedding some light about some of the startups that you have supported at Mastaj and Catalyst. And lastly, as we look into the future, it is clear that resilient cities are ones that can adapt to the ever-changing needs of its population. And this is where the role of entrepreneurship really becomes important and critical, as entrepreneurs are uniquely positioned to innovate and scale solutions to respond to real-world problems. So today we will explore three main things. We will explore the multi-layer approaches to how entrepreneurship contributes to smart cities evolution. We will discuss specifically, as the WIN Fellowship, how women-founded startups can contribute to the UAE's plans for advancing smart cities. And lastly, we will also highlight the various investment tools and mechanisms that startups in the UAE, in the MENA region, can use to contribute to the growth of their smart cities. So I encourage you all to join me for this discussion and to act collaboratively and to look for ways that we can contribute to the cities of tomorrow. To do so, it is my pleasure now to introduce our panelists for today. Online, we have with us Nadine Bitar Shaheen. Nadine is the managing director of Baladia Catalyst, and she's a MENA native woman who has.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Nadine. Nadine is involved in the planning process, has been involved in the planning process of more than 45 large-scale projects. She's an advisor on urban policies and strategies and programs in Abu Dhabi, Riyadh, Dubai, Sharjah, Mecca, and Jeddah. And her mission is to catalyze the transition towards livable, sustainable, resilient, and innovative MENA cities. In person, we have with us Shwetal Kumar. He is the managing director of the Catalyst, which is a joint venture between Masdar City and BP. And he is, which is also the MENA region's first clean tech accelerator and investor focusing on sustainability, energy, and clean tech. And last but not least, we have with us Hiba Abadrabbo. She is the regional advisor to BP, and she focuses on strategic partnerships across the MENA region, where in this role, she supports BP's efforts to accelerate the adoption of low carbon technology by partnering with governments, industry stakeholders, and technology innovators in the region. So to kick off the discussion, I will actually start with you, Shwetal. Catalyst is a Masdar, as I mentioned earlier, it's a Masdar and BP joint organized startup technology accelerator that is based in Masdar City, one of the smartest cities in the UAE, but also globally, I should say. Its vision is to help create a robust ecosystem that is focused on sustainability by supporting startups across the region. Could you please share with us a little bit about the vision of the Catalyst and how it aligns with the broader goals, one of Masdar City and two of the UAE?
Great. First of all, thank you so much for having me here. Am I audible? I hope I'm audible enough. So as you said, like Catalyst is is actually established as a joint venture between Masdar City and BP. And one of our core mission is to see how we can advance innovation and sustainability. Our mandate is to invest in and support startup in sustainability, clean energy, and climate tech. But at the same time, how we can help them advancing from their concepts to the market-ready solutions. Our ethos is pretty much aligned with the shareholders' visions. For example, Masdar City's key objective is to be a sustainable hub at a global scale, and also BP's objective is to meet the net zero by 2050. So pretty much we are aligned with that. And our focus is to foster innovations or advanced technology innovations to the area where we see that's where Catalyst can add value more to that contributes to sustainable urbanizations and renewable energy and also carbon reduction solutions.
Mm-hmm. And can you perhaps share with us a little bit about some of the examples of the startups that the Catalyst has worked with and how they've contributed to this vision?
Yeah, so broadly, I mean, if you look at the Catalyst, when we look at the investment thesis, we also pretty much align with even the UN SDG goals, whether you speak about the clean energy or the clean water, even sustainable city. I think you spoke about sustainable cities a few times, so pretty much we are aligned with that, as well as even in terms of the climate action. So we ensure that somewhere we fit into all our the core UN SDG when we invest. So far we have invested few startups from the first fund, and we announced some investment this year, and also through the accelerator program that we recently launched. Some of the success stories that I can share, like for example, in the first fund which we invested, one of our startups are actually building the innovative solutions for homes to battery storage. It's a company called Volt. Recently during COP29, they announced their collaborations or consortiums with Azerbaijan energy companies to essentially meet the national electric mobility plan. So they're kind of working at a very much national level to meet the strategic objective at the government level. They also announced a partnership with the global giant like Schneider's, Honeywell's, to build the industry skills of energy solutions. The company is growing fast, and Catalyst is kind of very proud that we invested at a very early stage and help them in terms of providing the opportunity to work with even shareholders, some of the business unit of our shareholders. Other company which we believe has been really doing well is the company called Saka Biotic. They started initially kind of converting this agriculture waste to the insect oil. So basically, they produce this insect oil from black soldier fly. It is a process that goes through converting the larva to eat the agriculture waste and converting to the oil that can be used for the fertilizer as well as animal protein. But recently, they got a breakthrough in sustainable aviation fuel, and we have seen the innovations which they have is actually scalable. Catalyst is looking to double down on the success to add some more investments. And given that there's the looming global shortage for the sustainable aviation fuel, mainly is driven by the mandate from for example, EU for ensuring that that all this aviations move to sustainable aviation fuel by 2050. Basically increasing the stake to 70% in terms of the market share for sustainable aviation fuel, and we see this company as a huge potential. And this is where even BP is also kind of looking to see that how can support further to kind of help in terms of pivoting their business to more into this sustainable aviation.
Well, the work you're doing is really fascinating, and I'm glad that some of your fellows and founders are with us today. But you did mention something about BP, which is your net zero goals, achieving net zero goals by 2050, or even sooner. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to you, Hiba. So BP has really increased its global investments in lower carbon and convenience stores and power trading businesses. And all of these efforts are really speak to BP's mission of reimagining energy. I'm hoping if you can tell me a little bit about what you think the role of big multinational companies like BP, what this role has in influencing the future of sustainable urbanization, one. And if you can speak specifically about BP's main initiatives that are contributing to the future of smart cities in the UAE.
Yeah, and thank you for having me. I also get to work with Sweatin and Gladys, who's on the other side of the table constantly with Catalyst, which I'll touch on in a minute. But BP has goals to invest $8 billion by 2030 in what we call our 5 growth engines. That includes, like you mentioned, power, renewables, hydrogen, EV charging, and convenience. Mm-hmm. We look at this as a step towards supplying tomorrow's energy. Our critical mission is to also supply today's energy. So we have goals and ambition to also lower greenhouse gas emissions from our existing operations through AI, methane regulations, etc. So we're doing the work to decarbonize our operations today, meet affordable energy needs for today, as well as investing in innovative technologies for tomorrow through our growth engines. Your second question was about urbanization. So as urbanization increases, there's going to be more demand from cities for power, right? More demand for infrastructure. You mentioned interconnection of ecosystems, right? We're in the infrastructure business too. So one story that I like to often refer to was at my time in the US, where we were looking at our EV charging strategy from scratch, really, in the US. And what we did was we went to what we call the interconnection corridors. I'm looking at my US colleagues, they know this, but highways are big in the US, and they're very clear where we are. BP has the advantage of we also have retail stations there. So we looked exactly where the demand is, where are the vehicles traveling, where are people charging. We have a partnership with Uber, so we're also able to tap into Uber's partnership and build EV charging stations where we know they will be used, right? And that's the sort of synergies that with the increase of urbanization, we have the focus of, all right, where are people going? What do they need and what can we offer? So it's very targeted. And like I said earlier, we're in the infrastructure business. That's one example. Another example is solar and wind, right? We have offshore wind JV off the coast of New York, and we work with partners, local, state, and federal government to make sure that the right infrastructure is in place to complement these offshore wind farms, right? We build the offshore, but we need transmission lines. So that's, again, the sort of input that we give cities where, we show them this is where you need transmission lines. This is how much electricity you'll be able to produce. And this is how it lowers your dollar per megawatt, pricing.
What's very fascinating, and the reason I mentioned in my introduction that this is a topic that I'm really interested in is because you're talking from the accelerator point of view, you're talking from the multinational company point of view, and I'll be here giving my policy angle to it. So it's such a big, diverse topic that really, at its core, is going to impact all of our lives in the future and of our kids' lives and future generations. So I'd like to just take a second to remind the audience that the WIN Fellowship is a fellowship housed within a think tank, and our ultimate goal is to shape the policies of the future. And if we can do this through technology, through entrepreneurship, and through innovation to create a more sustainable future through the power of policy, then this is really our ultimate goal. And this is what we're trying to do here today through your voices as entrepreneurs and your ideas and your solutions. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, Hiba. At this point, since we talked a little bit about policy, I'd like to move to Nadine, who's with us online. And I have a very interesting question for you, Nadine, one that honestly makes me wonder a lot of times when we look at the designs, urban designs, and it's the systematic ways that architecture can really impact gender and climate change. The first question I have for you is how, from your experience, how do you see climate change and gender inequality intersect? And why is it essential to address both issues together to ensure a just transition to a sustainable future within smart cities? And actually, if I may, I asked some of our fellows before this session, the ones who are joining virtually, for anyone who would like to contribute an online question. And one of our fellows gave me an example that she has read that AC temperatures are actually adjusted in public spaces according to men's bodies, basically. And how can we take that example into consideration as we shape spaces for the future in smart cities? So I'll turn this over to you, and then I have another follow-up question as well.
Thank you. Can you hear me well?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Why we are raising the issues of gender and climate change, because the latest research in climate change and also multiple UN reports from multiple agencies have highlighted the fact that women are one of the most vulnerable groups when it comes to climate mitigation and climate adaptation. So for climate mitigation, the increase of emission affects the health of women, and also it affects their sometimes economic productivity when you have multiple impacts. And this is where climate mitigation comes. As you know, in the global south, especially in emerging economies, in rural areas, for example, the women are the head of the households, and they are also, some of them are form the majority of the small farm holders. When you go to the urban areas and we talk about cities, then this is where women actually lead their communities when it comes to resilience. And they are very active on the ground in terms of the non-profit sector, in terms of the civil society, and also in terms of being a locus of their community. So in a way, women are not only affected by climate, but also it could be an entry point for us to talk about how we can find solutions for climate, because there are many research also talking about different ways in which we approach women and cities and climate. The first one talks about education and the importance of awareness, because when you educate a woman, you educate the whole community. And it's proven that increasing awareness of environmental issues or of climate issues, but also of urban issues for women, it actually has a ripple effect to the community she's in. The second one, and it's very important, it has to do with policy, and there needs to be more gender lens for policy. And I give you an example. For example, transport. One of the most important sectors that is responsible for majority of emissions in our cities, especially in the global south and in emerging economies, is transport. And shifting from private transport to public transport needs a gender lens, because you need also to develop transport systems that are really gender sensitive, that takes the consideration of women that have families, women that have certain safety issues, but also women that needs certain consideration in terms of privacy. So totally agree when it comes to standards and how policy around transport needs to talk also about new standards in terms of how we can bring the transport system to be more gender sensitive, especially when it comes to women. And the third one I want to really talk about, and it's very, very important, and it has taken mainstream, and there are so many reports around them, and there's one that UNDP released with Arab, the Cities Alive. It's about how we can also talk about gender in the context of human development inside cities, and how we can bring the social aspects and the social dimension into planning cities and thinking about cities and thinking about how the spaces of our city could be and could look like, not only to empower women, but also to make them more economically mobile. Because economic mobility of women is very important when it comes to community resilience and when it comes to cities. Last but not least, and it's now a new topic that we are always thinking about, is that representation of women in climate negotiation, and how women leaders can be brought into giving also perspectives of the 50% of global population into climate issues, but also in cities. How can we bring more women to the table in managing our cities and leading our cities and planning our cities? Because then they can be also voices, not only for women, they can be voices for children, for elderly, for parenting, for many issues, and in an integrative approach. So these are all cross-cutting issues that are really at the intersection between climate, cities, and women.
I'm glad you mentioned them, and I actually have a follow-up on one of your points, which is, and the policy point, of course, which is representation and making sure that we have women in policy making who can help raise awareness about such needs. Can you perhaps share a few examples or a few ways in which women policymakers can actually raise the volume on this need, but also support entrepreneurs and female founders in taking part of this transition?
Yes, of course. I think the first thing that it's always understand the importance of peer-to-peer learning and coaching and mentoring. So women in policy circles can influence policies by also engaging with the younger population, young entrepreneurs, and bringing their experience to them, and really transferring knowledge into how they can have impactful conversation. Because a lot of time we find that the young entrepreneurs or even women entrepreneurs, young women entrepreneurs, they have a very good understanding of the problem. Actually, sometimes they surprise us with the insights they have, with the energy they have. But it is our maybe responsibility towards them is to help them how they can take this understanding and make it more palatable, more strategic, so they can influence and they can advocate for the change they want to have. One of the things I always also think about, because entrepreneurship is also about finding these innovation entry points, and policy is always looking for entry points to pathways of change, right? Transformative points. And in that sense, it is very important to understand really which policy framework they need to link to. So entrepreneurship can identify in the policy framework entry points that links directly to the solution. And then by doing that, they can become like change agent, like catalyst for a better future. So that's the second point where I think there could be contribution, and it's very valuable contribution. Many aspects when it comes to policy seem complicated, but if we break down policies into their cycles in terms of setting the agenda or doing the policy analysis or thinking of alternatives, or even talking about how policy can be taken out to different levels, right? Community level, local level. It could be also policies that are on a city level, but there is policy also at the national level. And if the entrepreneurship journey, if the journey that the startup or this effort is trying to solve on these multiple level of policy, which we call multi-level governance, then they can actually use policy as their lever rather than seeing the policy as something that is limiting them or confining them. Because at the end of the day, policy is here to bring more opportunities for change and more opportunities for transformation, especially around our urban environments in this region. Concrete example, we have a lot of time when it comes to cities, blind spots in policy. So, for example, apps around the intersection between transport and social safety or social health or social mobility are very important. And they can give us really good feedback when it comes to evidence-based. And we know from a fact that some technology companies that went into the mobility sector have been able also to provide cities and city authorities with very precious evidence on how people move and where they move and what are their preferences. So I think entrepreneurship can be also a treasure of data for our cities in order to influence policy. So it's not only upstream policy, but also downstream policy. And the last one is, of course, community engagement, participatory approaches. Technology has revolutionized. It's a revolution in the way we approach community, we engage with community, because it allows us also to engage with the youth, to allow us to engage with multiple generations. Of course, we need to talk about also digital literacy, and we need to make sure that also the elderly and old women are also brought to the platform. So these are multiple ways in which entrepreneurship can engage with policy, but also in which entrepreneurship can feed policy in a way.
I totally agree with everything you just mentioned, and thank you so much for reflecting on that very important point, which is when we're thinking about the future of smart cities, we need to be focusing on inclusion. We need to be focusing on economic opportunities, but also we need to be focusing on equality when it comes to that, and making sure that everyone's voices is heard across the table. As you know, you've also touched on the importance of looking at policy from different perspectives. And as I was preparing for this panel, it's interesting to see the growing number of multilateral agreements on the future of smart cities, whether it's at the UN or between countries, but also looking at policies on a regional level and on a domestic level, which I'm sure Shweta, you can share more with us about it from Masdar City's policy perspective. But at the core of policy, and what you were talking about, Nadine, is looking at partnerships and recognizing that we can't do this alone. And then that one important aspect of smart cities is the interconnection of smart cities. I was actually at an event yesterday where I heard a fact that really shocked me, which is that today there's still 250 million people that don't have direct access to electricity. And yet here we are talking about how we can even accelerate even more so some of our smartest cities in the region. And so just making sure that in the future, as I mentioned, we're reaching nearly 10 billion people in 2050, that when we're having this discussion on smart cities, it's really a discussion that includes us globally, and that does not further separate communities from one another. So speaking about partnerships, I'm going to turn back to you, Hiba. So as a big multinational corporation, BP has increasingly focused on supporting entrepreneurship as part of your strategy to drive innovation and sustainability. And of course, as a transition to cleaner energy, and you've done it through multiple platforms. You've had platforms such as your partnership with Masdar City on the Catalyst, but you also have BP Ventures, you have BP Launchpad. And so I was wondering if you can share a little bit with our audience what differentiates these initiatives from one another, and if you can highlight the importance specifically of partnerships and recognizing that you can't do this alone and that you need to engage the community, as Nadine said.
Yeah, so Nadine touched on a few things that I thought were really interesting, and I'll talk about BP Ventures and Catalyst, as well as a company called Travel Centers America that we acquired recently. So I'll start with that because it really ties into some of the stuff that Nadine talked about. So for those that don't know, Travel Centers of America is a truck stop. It's one of the largest in the US. It spans across 40 plus states. It's across the highways. And it is run by a female CEO. Right, and I'm planting that seed because I think it's really important to Nadine's point that women in leadership help catalyze, no pun intended, some of these entrepreneurial spirits. Truck stops also happen to be in the US, the biggest trafficking hubs. And so the CEO decided to take up on herself to initiate the education of the communities that operate around the truck stops, as well as all 18,000 employees of Travel Centers of America on what they need to look for, right? Signs, signals on what someone who's being trafficked is going to be asking for, as well as education, right? Engaging with the community, not just across the Travel Centers of America stops. And now when you're back in the US, I hope you look at Travel Centers of America and remember the story. But if you go in the bathroom, right? Every single bathroom stall has a paper that says, please call this number if you're being trafficked or you're uncomfortable with the person who's accompanying you, right? And I think that's a sort of engagements that come from the top down, and it was driven by female leadership. Not that I'm saying a male leadership would not do that, but it was one of the first things she did when she became CEO. So partnerships with community, education, as Nadine mentioned, as well as leveraging our existing infrastructure, right? To see places where we can continue to invest in communities safely.
Sorry to interrupt, but this just made me think, at what point, as such example, at what point can we take such example and take it to the policymakers and translate it into actionable policy items in the future? Because I feel like when it comes to entrepreneurship, it's really a trial and error space for all founders. And then once it clicks and makes sense, I think this is where the magic really happens, and we can take such examples and move it to the policy level.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that, on engaging governments, whether it's at the local level or the national level or the regional level on such examples?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely necessary, right? It was with the support of the local government that we were able to do this sort of campaign initiative, which also the campaign was run by a woman, right? But, you know, I often find a disconnect when you start tearing up to the federal level. I think a lot of these locations are sort of secluded and they don't have as many, you know, I guess you would say traffic. So I think it's important for companies like BP to continue to advocate for this, and we do advocate for that sort of stuff. But there's definitely sometimes a disconnect when it elevates all the way up to the federal level, for sure. Yeah, but these are success stories that we advertise and make sure we advocate for it. Yeah.
And can you share a little bit about the differences between the different initiatives that you have, whether it's BP Ventures?
Yes.
Or,
yeah. So I'll start with BP Ventures. So it's our venture arm where we invest over $1 billion since 2006 in companies, over 40 companies. We invest in everything from carbon capture to EV charging to aggregating power and real estate. But that is really looking at Series A onwards, right? So maybe a little more mature, have more of a business case. With Catalyst and where it comes in for the BP story is Catalyst is based in the UAE. It's a Masdar city joint venture. UAE is a very important region for us. We've been operating here for a very long time. And we felt like there was a void in pre-seed or seed investments, which what we'll talk about a little more. But really brand new ideas. I'm looking at the ladies sitting here who are part of our program. Really new ideas, innovative ideas that need a little more ushering and support. So Catalyst comes in an early stage. Then if the business case makes sense, BP Ventures can take it and invest even more. And then we sort of put them in our BP machine, right? So a company called Blueprint Power came through our launch pad. Blueprint Power can aggregate electricity of a whole building and manage it in a way that's efficient and clean, okay? Blueprint Power did so well, we sort of engulfed it into the BP machine, and now they're a critical part of our trading and shipping business. So that's sort of, I would say, from A to Z, our approach in investments. We start with Catalyst, we seed early, goes to BP Ventures, more money, and then we make sure that they fit into our strategy and we're able to invest in them long term.
Amazing. And I'm glad that you mentioned the investment points, because Nadine, I'll turn back to you and momentarily about the investment question, but I have a question for you, Sweta. So one thing that is very interesting about Masdar City is that it's really driving forward the UAE's economic vision. And as we know, across the region, there are several economic visions that are, whether it's in the UAE and Saudi and Qatar, and they all really focus on shaping the economy based on technology, based on innovation and the solutions that they offer. Can you talk a little bit about how building strategies that prioritize collaboration on smart cities can help driving forward these economic visions across the region?
Yeah, I think it's, if you look at, Masdar City being one of our shareholders, they are living laboratories for us, for the startups, it's where you can actually test a lot of the solutions, which we invest in some of the companies towards sustainability and some of the innovation that can be adopted in Masdar City for their own sustainable city development. So Catalyst definitely acts as very crucial roles that how we kind of integrate those solutions to their sustainable development plan for the city, right? Masdar City got 6 verticals, pretty much we aligned with all those verticals and also aligned with BP Ventures as well as BP as well. So to see that how we support in terms of the overall national plan when it comes to maybe meeting the Falcon economic vision of the country. So we pretty much embedded our, the investment thesis to that. So how we aligned with the shareholders, essentially objective to meet a national level of objectives, right? So that's one of the things we look at. Now with these cohorts currently, which we announced in partnership with Flat 6 Lab, we clearly see the synergy with some of the companies that is part of the program that can work with Masdar cities. One being, I think you referred to some of the young entrepreneurs over here. For example, Bush and Options, like sometimes, these master developer likes of Masdar City, they engage a lot of these construction companies. Now, these construction companies generate a lot of construction waste, and it is the second largest contributor to the CO2 emissions as well. So one of the things which we like the ideas of this company, especially by the way, the woman founders, mother and daughter, and which even Nadine mentioned about how emphasizing about the women entrepreneurship for sustainable city development. So the solution which Bush and Option got is that like they collect this construction waste, such as tiles, marble, and the granite, convert into the art, that can be used by the master developer for their projects, like a big wall art for the interior or even for the exteriors landscaping. Now, with that, you can even see that how the CO2 emissions is reduced by reusing the materials back to the project, right? So you can track that. Other example, we have another female founder, Carbe. So they're building this green facade, biomimetic facades, which you actually you can inject the algae, and that actually use this the natural sunlight to grow the algae, but that capture the CO2 and split the CO2 into two parts, where the oxygen is released for purifying the building, so that clean oxygen is released, and then the carbon that captured in the algae can be stored as a byproduct and used for for example fish feed. And this through this process, you actually not only focusing in terms of purifying air, but also this facade can actually act as a thermals to reduce your energy consumptions, right? So this is another example that we see how they can integrate it in this Mazda City sustainable development. We have another company which, as part of the program, is looking at improving the soil health of the soils. So what they are doing is to converting agricultural waste, basically mixing with the engineered biochars to again lock the carbon, and this carbon in the biochar can lock for 1,000 years, and the soil you can actually use for landscaping as a city, or even grow any agriculture in arid land. So we clearly see like all the whatever we are investing, we see how the companies can see clear synergy with the business unit of our shareholders or the partners, because we also established a lot of partnership to see how it's essentially work in terms of meeting the goal of the nation, the UAE. So
I'm so glad that you mentioned these examples, and I'm so glad that you're here with us today. But I actually want to turn it over to the other side a little bit, maybe, which is the obstacles that some of the clean tech founders face, in whether it's attracting investments or even being taken by accelerators and having this trust given to them. Some of our fellows I know, particularly in Jordan, have startups focused on water solutions. In the UAE, in the past, we've had one of our fellows. She's the founder of Waste Lab. She's also done some work on sustainability and clean tech. But can you talk a little bit about some of these obstacles that founders face with their startups, and how do you help them go about these obstacles?
Yeah, you mentioned Waste Lab. I heard Waste Lab. So Waste Lab is a company actually we are pretty much close to the investments. I think we really like the founders. Female.
She was one of our WIN fellows.
Yeah, very, very amazing young, the female-led startup. We love this company. But yeah, I mean, speaking about the investment challenge, by the way, on the contrary, Waste Lab was lucky to get more investment, so they did not really struggle. So
yeah.
We see that this company can attract a lot of capital, but at the same time, of course, when it comes to the operation, they may need some supports, in terms of accessing different industry for the waste collections and all. Anyway, in general, speaking about the challenges, when we look at investing in the companies, one of the challenges that we see that these companies are very much into the research and development. They are very deep tech, doing a lot of research, and hence they need a lot of capital, because this is some of those projects that we invest is very capital intensive. So the challenges which we see that how they raise capital in the future, right? Because at the end of the day, we also need to find an exit path for our investment. So BP Venture is the way we see that some point of time BP Venture will come at a Series A and we exit from there. But at the same time, you as an investor needs to do a lot of hand holding, so that when it reaches to the BP Venture, they invest confidently that we have done our part. This is now we will take over from there, right? So that's a challenge which we always see, that how we can help these companies to attract a lot of investments in the next series of the funding rounds, until they reach to the point that our strategic investor can further invest. The other thing I think we see the challenges when we invest is about the production and distributions, things that given that a lot of the companies got a tangible product, they need to see that how they produce and grow and distribute this through the network, as well as to scale the production in the region. Now, I think the catalysts bring the value, but we bring is the 1A about the mentorships. Like we provide a lot of strategic advice, mentorships to to the startups through a lot of the, advisory panel that we created, help in terms of giving the right insights in terms of the different segments of the business. The second thing is the kind of the industry network that we have, through our shareholders, through the partnership that we established, actually opened really a lot of doors for them, and the third thing, I think, when we invest, we see up the challenges about the IP. A lot of these startups, like I said, given that they spend so much time on the research, how they can create a high barrier of entry, how to kind of stand out in the competitions, that like they kind of create like a mode so that they can actually scale so fast. And competition, I mean, given that it's not just a software, right? What we are doing in the carbon tech is actually in the climate tech, it's a lot of the real products that goes, and it's sometimes you have a threat that somewhere in the China, some company will copy and release this product, right? So then the startup is out of the business. So that's a risk as an investor we always have, and how we as an investor can provide this kind of support or cocoon, create a cocoon that they can be, grow within our own ecosystems.
Thank you so much for sharing the piece on investments. This is actually a great pivot to my last question to Nadine before I ask you all my last question. And at this point, I'd like to just ask the audience if you have any questions that you'd like to ask towards the end of the discussion, please start preparing them. Nadine, I wanted to ask you if you can tell us a little bit how venture capital, government funding, and private investment can be leveraged to scale up the climate tech solutions for urban environments, but specifically if you can also talk about the role of intermediate cities in attracting investments and the role of venture capital there as well.
Yes, it's very important that we create platforms on which this collaboration could happen. And one of the things about climate technology is that it has multiple dimensions. It has the science dimension, and that science dimension, when it's transitioned into a business sense, it needs to be really rethought of and rewritten in a way that also link back to the business model and be more purpose-driven, I would say. So that journey of the entrepreneur from the science foundation to being more clear about the business model, this is where I think the guidance of certain actors can happen. But we are noticing that one of the things that all cities now are thinking of is that entrepreneurs can find solution much faster than other entities. And if we can create these platforms, especially in the local level, for example, on the municipality level or on the metropolitan level, where we give entrepreneurs access to our urban data, they can leverage it, and they can, with the guidance of big firms and multinational firms, they can use it to really think of their ideas in a better way. So what are the platforms that we can do in order to bring all these actors together, and how we can leverage entrepreneurship as a cycle rather than just a linear process? Because also what happens is that as one entrepreneur start thinking of solution and this start getting momentum, we notice that there is a clusters now being built around these topics, and how these clusters talk together is very important when it comes to building the ecosystem for climate entrepreneurs. I want to talk also about the aspect of women entrepreneurs, because it's very important. We have been talking for some time saying that STEM, especially when you talk about technology entrepreneurships, we need more women in that space. And for smart cities, women entrepreneurs are very important because they don't only bring the technology, but they bring also the social aspects that these technology could have and could impact. And this is very, very important when we talk about these platforms that we need to do. That this platform also, I'm a believer that women entrepreneurship needs, like women leadership, a way to accelerate and a way to really groom them in terms of startups. And if we do that in the space of climate technology, I think we'll be amazed with the result. Now, talking about the second thing, Baladia Catalyst is a purpose-driven, community-centered consulting that I opened with my co-partner because we realized that there is a gap, especially when it comes to the secondary cities, that usually they don't have enough budget or enough access or enough resources for them to really think about climate action planning and sustainable development. And during that journey, we realized that when we talk to the mayors of these MENA cities, especially secondary or what we call them intermediate cities, they need really, there is so many tools that they need them to be in one place, or let me say, they need to map themselves around them. And therefore, in our website, we have created like a free assessment tool for these intermediate cities to really think about how they can access climate finance and really make climate finance more palatable to them, more tangible to them. You know, when you talk about climate finance with these mayors, some of them think it's too complicated, but really climate finance, the name might give this impression of being complicated, but we're trying to demystify climate finance into this free assessment tool and give them really in very small steps and very clear questions, what are the things that they could do in order to make their programs or their ideas or their priorities more eligible to climate finance. And we hope that by doing these free assessment tools, we give a score at the end, and that score really gives them the idea where they are in terms of their readiness for accessing climate finance and how they can integrate it within their community needs. Because climate, I'm a believer that when you talk about the climate angle of smart city, it shouldn't be a top-up. We shouldn't think of climate as a top-up of smart city. No, we should see it as it's part of the DNA of smart city. So it needs to be an integrated policy approach. There's nothing called smart city, green city, resilient city, sustainable city. There is a city, and everything here comes together in an integrated way. And climate finance, actually, if you see all the frameworks by most of the funding agencies, it is about that. It's about bringing this integrated approach. Of course, there are things we want to change, especially for intermediate city in the MENA, and that is local knowledge transfer. We know we rely sometimes on outside suppliers to help us in climate action planning, but we need to really make sure there is a local knowledge transfer. That's climate action planning in intermediate cities actually build the capabilities of these intermediate cities to not only revise their plans, but also to implement their plans. And the free assessment tool also that is on our website help the cities understand how such local knowledge transfer and local capacity building can happen. And we hope that with as we grow or as we become more resourceful, we would have a more gender angle to capacity building when it comes to climate finance and intermediate cities.
Thank you for mentioning your point about looking at cities as cities and not just green cities or gender inclusive cities or resilient cities. I think looking at the smart cities is acknowledging that we're looking at a multidisciplinary approach, and that sustainability by its nature has an economic dimension and gender dimension, environmental dimension. And this actually leads me to my last question to our attendees, which you touched upon, Nadine. But we are in a room that has a lot of entrepreneurs, and a lot of our WIN fellows are also watching online. When driving smart cities forward, how would you advise entrepreneurs to think about sustainability in a holistic way? If you can both share your perspectives, and then I'll turn it over to the audience in case you have any questions.
I mean, so like I said, Catalyst, when we look at investment, we also kind of look at how we align with the UN SDG goals as well as how it align with the general national agenda when it's meeting the Falcon economy. So it's obvious that the company that we work actually comes with that sort of a mindset, right? Now the challenge that we have is how to scale the business. It's not like all sustainability startups that come with the idea are succeeded. I mean, in general, that the startup failure rate is quite high, but that's where I think we come. I would say the Catalyst operate as at the intersections of entrepreneurship, research, and also the policy, which Nadine mentioned a few times, and as well as the industry, like how we create those ecosystems and support these companies, right? All the startups. So essentially, what Catalyst is not just an investment partner or investment fund, but at the same time, through our shareholder, through the partners, we create the ecosystem that actually help them to grow in those sustainable environment, right? So that's how we kind of ensure that we embed the sustainability in all the companies, the founders, the educations, then also the importance of that. Sometimes the idea, because we come at a very early level, which means that they still need to learn a lot. And that's, I think, the value that we bring from Catalyst perspective through our shareholders. I have to repeat shareholders over and over again.
Speaking of shareholders.
Yeah, so I guess I'll just share 3 statistics that maybe can help frame my answer. And one that I read today, which is a McKinsey study saying that if the gender gap was closed in the MENA region, then there's a $2.7 trillion increase in GDP. Likely, if economic gender parity is reached globally, then there's 26% increase in GDP. So this is a MENA problem, this is a global problem. The second statistic was that females are more likely business owners to invest back in their communities than men, right? And then the third one is females tend to go into sustainability more than men. And I think those 3 statistics sort of, to bring it back to the topic of this conversation, women entrepreneurs, we tend to think high level, we tend to take community as a core of what we do or always try to give back. And we tend to think holistically as a given. So I guess it's already inherited in us to think that way as women entrepreneurs. From a VP perspective, it's really important to integrate, like you mentioned, national goals into our business, right? So integrating aggressive yet realistic national goals like the ones that the UAE has into what you do is always important, right? Because that caters to the market. And while maybe the business case may not pencil in today, relying on policy could help make it pencil in. So that's at least how we look at it from a VP perspective. And I mean, Nadine kept on saying integration, we integrate sustainability into every single pillar. Like I opened up saying our existing oil and gas operations, we try to make them as efficient and try to monitor greenhouse gas emissions, as well as looking into tomorrow's future energy, where we're investing $8 billion in innovative growth engine technologies.
I think my main takeaway before I turn it to you is that really when looking at smart cities and the future of how policy should be tailored to drive forward smart cities is that we should include gender experts, we should include energy experts, we should also include anthropologists, because there are systematic barriers that we wouldn't think about when it comes to gender that anthropologists can help us point at. We should include economists, we should include environmental experts, scientists. It's a really multidisciplinary approach, and entrepreneurship is really creates a lot of windows of opportunities for us to change the way we think about the future, to come up with new solutions that can be taken to the policy level and shape not only the local, national, regional, but the global landscape when it comes to smart cities and urbanization. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, our audience here. Please feel free to ask your questions. I know, Lina, you have one. And also before that, if for whoever is watching online from the WIN Fellows, please send me your questions as well. Lina, over to you. But if you can also raise your voice a
Okay,
little bit.
sure. Can you hear me well? Thank you very much for the insightful conversation. And it's always fascinating to hear about smart cities, how things evolve. And I have two questions that are very much related. We talk a lot about infrastructure, sustainability, climate, and then we talk about concepts like gender or equality, equity, accessibility, vulnerability, people. But so far, it's so little work that has been happening on the real human-centric experience in these cities. So we always talk about the products, and the services, and the technology itself, but about human experience in living in these cities, it's an area where it's absent and there's lack of funding in that. So we found a lot of funders or ventures that are interested to see the new smart solution to a problem or infrastructure solution, but there barely isn't, because I can say never, because I didn't see all what is out there, but no investment in teaching and upskilling people and helping them have better mobility and accessibility to all these smart systems that are integrated into these cities. So people live in these cities, some of these groups are so marginalized, like elderly, like people with disability, like women, like children, because all these amazing solutions are around them, but they don't know how to utilize it, how to use it, how to navigate it. I've been visiting the sustainable cities across the UAE. I went to Masdar, I went to Dubai and Sharjah. They build on each other's learnings. However, a major issue was it makes people more isolated and it caters to a specific age segment, education, and it's definitely creating more hardship if some certain groups will go there. So it's beautiful to invest in entrepreneurs and their ideas, but it's not only because a woman came up with an idea is important to invest. It's important to invest in solutions that will help women, elderly, disability living in these cities to make their life easier and more helpful to navigate. So my question is how much interest or awareness we could raise to make investors invest on human-centric, let's say, upskilling, learning, soft services instead of infrastructure only and products, and how we can rethink from a policy perspective, making these smart cities more human-centric with easier experiences.
Also, Nadine, if whenever you would like to jump in, please feel free to do so. Would any one of you like to take that question first?
I think
Go ahead.
from a human perspective, we have a 4 P's principles for investments, and one being the people, right? So people, product, productivity, and potentials. People is very important for us. I mean, we are actually building the future leader, right? And so ensuring that we have the right set of the people who can actually drive the business, essentially bring return for us as an investor at some point in time. So people, the mix of the experience that they have actually, which sometimes you'll see that like they're single founders, but can they gain the complementary skills from the team that they develop or the advisors that they have, right? But I think you're referring to the other problem, which is from the sustainable city, how the people are getting back, especially speaking about the people of determinations and other, let's say, the disability, right? There's a lot of things when you build the sustainable city, there's a lot come from the policy angle, like how you create the city to that kind of cater to the need of all segment of the society. It's very inclusive, right? So I think that's one thing I guess more come from planning. However, from as an investor, we see how we upskill our leaders who actually think of whenever they're building the solutions, they also kind of think those aspects when they embed, in their products, right? How the product helps those segments of the people. So those are the aspects we look at in our startups, because it's not the solution which they provide, it is actually solving the small problem. I think we need to see that they are actually addressing the bigger problem, right? And the problem actually can touch upon the lives of all kind of people. So that's how we look at investing. But I'll give my personal experience. To be honest, I share my personal experience. I launched an app some time back to connect the people of determinations and elderly peoples with the volunteers, because I've seen that there's especially in the developed nations, I think these kind of people are excluded, so they are in isolations. They have, I think that they need to be connected to the society. But on the other hand, there's a lot of volunteers out there who actually really wants to do something for the society. They want to connect. But the problem is that how to find that. So that's something which I launched some time back to connect that. And I've seen this, suddenly there's a lot of interest from both the part of the ecosystem or kind of a network effect that's created, where they're really dying to meet with each other to share. One side, they want to come out from that isolation and connect with the people, talk to them, go out, the people of determination or elderly people. On the other hand, there's a really people, the volunteer who wants to do something for the society. But the problem is that they don't know who is where, right? So that's what we wanted to do. That's something I play a small role in terms of supporting the sustainable city, the things that you mentioned.
Can I intervene? I just have a few remarks to make. I think the first thing that you can, I'm going to be more on the proactive optimist side. So because I feel like for entrepreneurship, we need always a good dose of that. The first thing is, and I noticed it in much of my work over the past 23 years, is user journey. Smart city is throughout their dimensions, whether it's mobility dimension, what is energy dimension, whether it is about accessibility or affordability or any dimension. You need to map the user journey and the user experience. And then you can say, okay, at this point, we are choose. And then your entrepreneurship solution is about touching point on this user journey and user experience. And why we are saying that? Because at the end of the day, data is the new, for me, is the new oil. So data, when you do that user journey experience, when you identify these points, then you can collect data, and that data will be your entry point into investment, will be your entry point into getting funding, will be your entry point into seed funding. So one is user journey. The second one, soft issues are not anymore not measurable. When we didn't have the technology, when we weren't advanced enough, we couldn't, for example, measure well-being. We couldn't measure quality of life. We couldn't measure proximity. We couldn't measure inclusion. We couldn't measure human development. Also, there was an index, but it wasn't, now we are better. And this amazing devolution and how we can measure things from what we call conventional and non-conventional ways, using different big data, using machine learning, but also using sources like citizen science in order to map behaviors and to map the way we interact with the city. This is the foundation of how entrepreneurs can solve and can build a better future. And there are many, I'll give you an example. London has launched a happiness application. After it launched the happiness application, they have made all the data from the happiness application open source. And then entrepreneurs jumped in and started, experimenting with this data and finding ways into how they can leverage this data. So smart city and sustainability intersection, especially around human-centric, is about two things. One, user journey. Second, leveraging data. It's very, very important.
Let me just piggyback very quickly. And Lena, you bring up a really, really good point and a real point, right, that we sit down and we think about often. And I'm not sure if you were here when I gave the example of how we started our EV charging business, but it was really based on demand, right? We wanted to factor in utilization rate into our business case. And this way, as a business, right, the more it's being used, the more money we make. So I think from a business perspective, tying in utilization rate can help businesses like ours invest, right? In terms of policy, that's where affordability and accessibility comes handy. You know, unfortunately, a lot of, you know, companies will go the cheap route unless the policies are there to keep the price below a certain, you know, dollar per kilowatt or subsidize it. And unless there's specific rules and regulations where it says it has to be accessible, I would not, you know, bank on the good faith of people to do it. At BP, we always use the most stringent regulations out there, so it's always safe, accessible, and affordable. But I think that's sort of the link between what Nadine was talking about, user journey data, utilization rate, putting a dollar value on it, right? And then adding the policy piece.
Thank you. That addressed what I asked.
Nice.
Because I just want to say, it's not only about socializing within the space, it's about really being able to navigate the necessities of your life with an affordable price and easy to access way. Thank you.
Absolutely. We'll take in one more question if there's anyone who has a question.
I have one for Hiba, representing a multinational. We talked about collaboration and the importance of that. But I didn't think the issue of collaboration was with another venture arm of another multinational, because you're in competition with each other. So how do you sort of still pursue an approach to collaboration, maybe with the government, with nonprofits, with society at large, and promote creative, disruptive tech ideas that are sometimes competing with your lines of business, and still sort of maintain, you know, business growth in your core, when you're trying to sort of invest away from the hydrocarbons that you're in, and you know, so it's kind of a bit challenging, right?
Yeah. I'll give you a short answer because we don't have all day, right? But we often say we're in the and, not or business. So we're looking at hydrocarbons and renewables, right? Because this is where we are today. To your question, I mean, competing business interest is a product of multinationals. You know, that's a given, right? We're a big business and we operate globally in big regions, offering a multitude of products. But we do think that diversification of energy is really important. So that is really our North Star. It's not so much that, you know, let's take from here and put here sort of thing. Again, it's an and, not or. On your point on collaboration and partnerships, I mean, we have a JV with ADNOC, right? People would say, you know, that's your competitor. No, we look at it, you know, we are 10% shareholder of their LNG and onshore gas. We look at it as a betterment of the system, a safer way to operate. And, you know, we give them our subject matter experts. And then, you know, we work with other multinational companies, oil and gas companies, to make sure that everything is done safely, everything is done within our standards, right? And everybody benefits, as well as we share the risk. So that's where a lot of that partnerships that you're talking about with potentially people who could be looked at as competitors is a sort of our happy place, really. ADNOC JV is one of the most important JVs that we have globally. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Sorry?
I hope that answers your question. Okay.
What we call as competitions, corporate and compete.
Right. I like.
It's a friendly competition.
It's a friendly competition. Well, with that, I believe we are out of time, but I would like to thank you all for coming to join us today. I would like to thank our panelists one more time. Nadine, Zita, thank you for joining us virtually. Hiba, thank you. Sweta, thank you so much. Thank you for joining our WIN Fellowship event. Again, this is the third event of our WIN Fellowship cohort for the UAE for 2024-2025 with the support of the US consulate here in the UAE. And of course, we cannot end this event without thanking our partners in the UAE, AGGM. Thank you for co-hosting this event with us. I think my main takeaway of today's discussion is that really the collaboration between the public and the private sector when it comes to smart cities is essentially important, but also that technology cannot do it alone. It is the entrepreneurial spirit that we need, an entrepreneurial mindset, and I'm so happy that I am surrounded by this mindset and that the spirit. It's going to be crucial in building resilient smart cities that do not necessarily just focus on climate by itself or gender by itself or energy by itself, but it looks at it as a multidisciplinary approach, a comprehensive approach that takes into account environmental, economic, and social accounts. Thank you so much for joining us, and please join us later on for the reception. Thank you.
Thank you.